So we're going to talk about water flood diagnostics with advanced well testing and well interference studies. So, water flood, right? I think most of the oil in the world is being produced with water flood. And what could actually go wrong with a water flood? You produce oil, you inject water, you support the pressure, the water displaces your oil, you get more oil. It's quite simple, right? But you know, while having had experience with many subsurface teams on surveillance of waterflood projects, I can tell you that literally anything can go wrong with waterflood. And let's just run through several cases, and I will show you how it looks in the reality. Maybe some of you could get some flashbacks from your previous or ongoing projects. All right, so this is one of the fields which a while ago I had been surveilling. So this is how the water flood looked at start. So this is like the first year when we launched injection. You can see that everything looks pretty fine. We have a lot of oil producers, mostly zero water cut. We have a large amount of injection, so probably the displacement coefficient is quite nice, so everything looks fine. Let's see what happens in 5 years. Well, 5 years later, it doesn't seem so pretty. You can see that we lost, well, I think a half of producing wells due to watering out. So most of these wells have a lot of water now. Some of them are already shut. We also closed some injectors because it was clear that some injection wells were just putting water in producing wells directly. So it was like a giant laundry when the water went round and round in circles. So let's wait another 5 years and see what happens. Right. So it's been only 10 years of the field's history, and we have reached the rate of possible production of, like, I believe it was below 10. It was about 8%. So at this moment, the field is practically almost dead, and we only have taken 8% of the reserves we can actually get. So this is a sad story. It's quite old, actually. And now we have some technologies, we have some knowledge and experience on how to prevent this type of mistakes we made with this field, right? Okay, so before I go to the next, to the first case I want to show you today, I need to introduce you this technology, MRT, Multiwell Retrospective Testing. So this is one of technologies that we are using to analyze the water flood. Not only water flood. I think some of you who joined me a couple of months ago in my first webinar in the beginning of April, which was on compartmentalization and static model adjustments with dynamic data, you might remember the description of the technologies, but still I want to say a couple of words. I think we have new people today. So this technology is called Multiwell Retrospective Testing. The idea of the technology is that you have a long enough history of bottom hole pressure and rate in your wells. So it means that you need to have a PDG or ESP with a pressure gauge, and you store all your pressure data on some kind of a server, and you have like several months or even years of pressure history in your wells. So if you have this data, then you might be able to see that when you changed the rate of a well, a producer or an injector, then the offset wells, the wells around this well, will start changing the rate or pressure or both. So it means that throughout the history of the field development, we can see wells talking to each other, but we need to have this pressure data. So this is crucial for this technology, right? Here's how we do it. We have this well in the middle, which has a PDG, and we have several offset wells, some of them producers, some of them injectors. We call these several wells an MRT cell, and inside this cell we build a small mathematical model of these wells talking to each other, like a small interference model. That's how I would put it. So based on these small models, we may understand the reservoir pressure, the productivity index, and the actual history of cross-well pressure impact. So we can see which well is given the pressure to my well, and which well is taking the pressure, and how much pressure, right? All right, now let's jump into the case. The first case, well, I would call it a classic MRT case. So below here you can see the paper where you can see more details on this case. And it is a field-wide MRT analysis. So it means that we have a field with several deposits. You can see one of them on your screen. And this field is struggling with several problems. One of them is the fast increase of water cut in producing wells, and simultaneously reservoir pressure drop and non-uniform pressure drop. So we have high pressure somewhere and quite low pressure somewhere. Nevertheless, we have, well, a system, a pressure maintenance system, which looks quite balanced. So if we build a PIR plots and we build a map where we see the displacement coefficients, it would seem quite normal, but still we have some problems. Now, what are the problems? You can see that most of the producers are horizontal, and most of the injectors are vertical wells. So it means that in order to keep the displacement ratio, you need to inject a lot of water at a very high repression in the injectors. So it means that the drawdown, right, if I may call it so in injectors, the drawdown is a lot higher in injection well than in producers. And unfortunately, it is a Western Siberia case, I believe. So unfortunately, the permeability is, well, quite low, I would say. And due to this high injection pressure, we are getting induced fractures. And a lot of water, which we're trying to inject in the target layer, is in fact going into the underlaying pay, which is water saturated, because the shale break between them is quite thin. So this is a major problem. We know it's happening, but we don't know where, and we don't know what are the amounts of this effect, right? So now we will try to estimate it with MRT. We are taking all the wells, all the producing wells. All of them have a very nice history of bottom hole pressure and rate, because the field is quite fresh, I would say. The active development had started in 2013, and then we interpret this data with the MRT workflow, and we focus on the injection impact. So it means that we're trying to understand which injector is bad, which is good, and in what way. So after we're done, we categorize these injectors into three categories. So category number one are injectors which are painted green here. So these are normal injectors, and by saying normal, I mean that the impact the pressure impact of these injectors onto the offset producers corresponds with the transmissibility we have for this formation. So it means that it seems like these injectors are injecting most of water into the right pay, and we see the impact on offset producers. So around in these areas, it's pretty much all right. The second category are the injectors I painted in orange. So the orange injectors are the ones which are losing most of the water in the thief layer. So we see that the impact of these injectors is considerably weaker than it should be predicted with the transmissibility we have for this formation, the distribution of transmissibility, right? So by the way, it explains why we have these red zones here, because these red zones are the largest reservoir pressure drop zones. So during our MRT, for every producing well, we estimated the current formation pressure, and here we saw the biggest drop. And now we can see why, because these wells, several injectors with a very high rate, which were supposed to support these areas, are actually losing most of the water, like in vain. Okay. And the third category of injectors, we have only one well in this category here, the red one. Ironically, this is the well which has the least injection, but this is the only injector which has the direct breakthrough into the offset well. So we can see with pressure data that this well is actually flooding this X12 horizontal, and all this water we have here is coming from this small X05 well. So yeah, sometimes we can see scenes like this. And now that we know the picture, now that we draw all these color circles and these arrows, we may understand what to do. So we're trying to suggest something. So based on this analysis, we had a full scope of the recommendations, but I want to focus on one here, which is like the most straightforward, but still not obvious when you don't see the MRT results. So just outside this horizontal, you see another producing well here. It is vertical, and it is situated right inside the area of the pressure drop. And it's next to another injector, but now we know that this injector is insufficient, and we recommend to switch this producer into injection. All right. So after some talking and convincing, our client switched this producer into injection, and here is what we saw. So you can see the history of X12 well here, and this orange line is the moment when we started injection in X28. So you can see here that right from the start we had a BHP increase and liquid production increase, and in about a month we increased the pressure drop. The water cut dropped substantially, and we had like let me see, it's about 200 or 300 barrels of oil back into production on this X12 only. So it means that this X12 is really watered out by this injector, which in fact was closed before this operation, right? And it also means that there is a pressure drop in this area, and there is a lot of oil to the north from this horizontal, which it can perfectly produce, which if we just increase the pressure here, which we proved by these results. All right, another thing we can do is to justify the well's candidate for these treatments. Well, let's call it EOR treatments. It's maybe not strictly correct, but in Russian oil industry we practice a lot this type of stimulations when in injecting wells with the supposed fractures we inject a viscous fluid, a small amount. Well, by saying small amount, I mean small amount comparing to the pore volume, but it would still be, well, several hundred cubic meters. And this fluid is supposed to block the fractures and prevent water from coming straight to the producing wells. I don't know if you practice some of those. By the way, guys, we have an open chat, and if you have some questions along the way, you please type away, and at the end of the presentation I will look through your questions and try to answer them all, okay? Right, so with this MRT we were able to see on this deposit or several other deposits, we were able to see several wells which have too fast pressure impact onto nearby producers, and we are supposing that these wells are causing the high water cut in those wells. So when we select this candidates for this treatment, we take into account the MRT results, and then in several wells we perform these treatments, and you can see that right, well, number 1, 2, 3, and you can see these red lines, which is the time of the stimulation on the injector, and you can see the water cuts drop and some oil production increase. Well, it's not much. I think it's well, around 100 barrels, but still, considering the low price of this treatment, this is a very nice result. Okay, let's go to another case. Another quite interesting case with MRT technology. We are trying to adjust target rates with MRT. So we have a completely different field. This is a very permeable sand, poorly consolidated with several Darcy permeability, but the problems are, well, I would say quite common. So we have a non-uniform reservoir pressure drop. We have areas with high pressure, with low pressure. We don't understand if there is any impact from the injecting wells. From some wells we do see the impact, but we cannot quantify it, and we would really much like to. Also, we have the anisotropy of cross-well interference. So we got inside this large pay, widely distributed, we actually have some channels which with even higher permeability, and we would like to see if through the cross-well impact it is possible to understand where the channels are, right? Also, we have the overall oil production decrease here, and well, we need to help our client with all these issues. So let's see what we can do here. So these are actually the results, and you can see some plots here. So we have a reconstruction of formation pressure history for the wells which were the focus well of our MRT cells. So we can see the blue line is the BHP, and the red line above is the formation pressure. And it's not just a line that we drew, it is actually a modeled line, and each curve on this line is an impact from the some offset producer or injector, right? So we now understand how the wells are talking to each other, and producing and injection wells. Also, we reconstructed the productivity index history, because now when we have the history of formation pressure, we also have BHP, we have rate, so it's like a straightforward calculation to understand what the PI is like. And we can see that the productivity index has dropped in, well, at least one of the wells, and the drop is substantial, it's 20-30%. because considering the productivity of these wells, this drop of PI actually means that we are losing like hundreds of barrels of oil per day. We can understand why, because we have a skin raise, and the raise of skin is substantial, and we can see that the most probable reason for that is that the gas liberating is causing the dual phase zone near the well bore, and it decreases the productivity of the wells. So this happens because our reservoir pressure went below the bubble point during the time that we observe with our MRT analysis. Right, so also we assess the well and reservoir properties. You can see that the permeability, yes, it's quite high. It's around 2 Darcy here. We have a very high skin at the moment. And also we estimated the drainage volume of the wells. Right, so these are the raw results. And as to the cross-well impact, no, not yet. The next step is to predict the formation pressure. So we just take our interference model, and then we perform a forecast in a no further activity scenario. So we're trying to understand how the reservoir pressure would drop further. And we can see here that given the concentrates of the wells and the offset wells, we can see that in both wells we analyzed here, we have a reservoir pressure drop, and we predict a further drop. And in one well, it's pretty moderate, but in this well, it's pretty sharp. So we can see that in no time, we will have another major drop of like 15 bars, which is critical for this field. As this yellow line here is the bubble point. I think you understand what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm just trying to say that MRT results in this case are highlighting the necessity and the urgency to increase injection. We need to increase the formation pressure because we are already losing the productivity of our producing wells due to the fact that formation pressure went below the bubble point. All right. And the next thing is the cross-well interference. So we have these maps of interference and these values of cumulative monthly impact or daily impact. So what we can see here is that the well interference tends to be higher in the north-south direction. So it means that the probable structure of these channels is north to south. Another thing we can see is that, around one of the tested wells, we had one injector, which is actually outside the barrier, and there was an idea that probably there is still a communication through the fault, but we weren't able to see any impact from this injector during the time that we tested this producer. So it doesn't seem like at the moment this injector is giving any pressure to this producing well. Some wells are closely connected. So it means that amongst other wells we have some pairs of the wells which are connected very tightly, and we can see that they are still in production from each other. For example, this well 365 and this well 255. So it's pretty far, but still, I think due to this heterogeneity, we have very fast communication between these wells. Right. And another, conclusion from this well interference study is that actually between any wells here, the impact is way too high to switch some of them into injection. So it means that the strategy of Waterflood is actually right here. So we need to put the injectors as far as we can, probably out there below the aquifer, below the free water level. But still, it is not a good idea to convert something here because we will have a fast and major water breakthrough into offset producers. All right, so now to the most interesting part. So as I told you before, we found several wells with a quite close connection between them. So it means that if I change the rate on a well, the liquid rate in the area will redistribute quite fast, and I will get the liquid production increase in another offset well. So it means that if I have, let's say, two such wells, and one well has a water cut of, I don't know, 5%, and the other one has, like in this case, around 60%, then if I reduce the production in this well, and I reduce the water production, and I will increase the same amount of liquid production in about a month on another producing well which has, well, almost zero water cuts, then I will get an oil production increase. And this I might do by simply switching the targets of my wells. So I need to restrict the rate of one well, then wait for months for the reservoir pressure to raise, and then increase the pressure drop in the good producer. So this is quite simple, quite fast, quite straightforward, and we can see it with these cross-well interference result we get from MRT. The next step is to forecast what, to quantify this effect. So what we're trying to do here is forecast it in three scenarios, like NFA, increasing the rate of the injector, and then reducing the production of watered out well, and increasing the injector rate. So these are the three scenarios on the formation pressure plots. You can see the drop here, a moderate raise here, and a quite fast raise here, which in terms of additional oil production would get us several hundred barrels of oil per day. So now, as you all know, with this OPEC plus in progress, many companies need to reduce the production of their wells. And I think that the main target of all our subsurface teams now, when we're facing this problem, is to reduce it wisely, so we would perfectly fit the oil production limit and minimize the lifting costs. So we would inject minimum water to get this oil, and we would produce minimum water again to get this oil. Right. So in this particular case, I'm just clearly demonstrating how it can be done, and based on what information.